Story 1. The Man Behind the Funhouse Mirror. The Man Behind the Funhouse Mirror. I was 19 when it happened. My girlfriend at the time, Megan, had talked me into going to a traveling carnival that had rolled into town one weekend in late August. You know the kind: cheap rides, loud music, the smell of funnel cake and corn dogs heavy in the air. It set up in an empty field just outside the town limits, and for a few days it became the place everyone hung out at. I wasn't the biggest fan of carnivals. Something about the flashing neon lights in the dark fields, the greasy carnies calling out to you from their booths, and the way it all seemed like a temporary illusion just unsettled me. But Megan loved that kind of thing. She was excited, holding my hand as we walked past the rides and games, laughing every time she won some cheap stuffed animal. It was sometime after dark when we came across the funhouse. It was the classic setup: bright lights framing a facade painted with clowns, spirals, and words like "World of Wonders" splashed across the front. Music played from hidden speakers, and a man outside dressed in a striped vest barked for people to come in. "Step right up, folks. Enter the House of Mirrors, the house of mystery, where what you see is never what you get." Megan begged me to go in with her. I hesitated but eventually gave in. We paid a couple dollars each and walked through the creaky entrance doors into a maze of glass, mirrors, and flashing colored lights. At first, it was fun. Megan would laugh every time we came across a distorted mirror, one that made us look tall and skinny or short and wide. The halls twisted and turned, and every time I thought we had reached the end, we'd bump into another dead end of glass. The sound of other people laughing and shouting echoed throughout the maze, distorted by the walls so you could never tell if someone was right around the corner or far away. Then, about halfway through, things started to feel off. We turned down one hall and came face to face with a tall mirror. Only this time there was something strange about it. Megan was standing right next to me. I could see her reflection, but something was wrong with mine. The reflection of me wasn't matching my movements exactly. I lifted my arm quickly, and for a split second, my reflection hesitated before following. I froze. "Did you see that?" I whispered to Megan. She giggled, brushing it off. "It's supposed to be creepy, babe. That's the point of a funhouse." But I wasn't convinced. I leaned closer to the mirror, staring at my own face. My reflection stared back, a little too intently. We kept going. The hall twisted again, and I started feeling a strange pressure in my chest, like the air was thicker in here. I heard footsteps too heavy, too slow to be anyone messing around. I thought it was behind us, but when I turned around, no one was there. The laughter of other carnival goers had faded. It was just us now, surrounded by silence and faint carnival music bleeding through the walls. Another turn, another mirror. Only this time, Megan pointed at it and frowned. "Wait, that's not right." It was our reflections again, but this time only I was in the glass. Megan wasn't. She waved her hand in front of the mirror. Nothing, just me, staring back. Okay, that's actually freaky. We turned another corner, walking faster now. The maze felt endless. My pulse was racing. Every mirror we passed looked normal at first, but if you stared just a second too long, something was off. My reflection smiling when I wasn't. My reflection blinking too late. My reflection's mouth moving slightly when I was dead silent. I told Megan we should just turn back, but when we did, the path behind us was gone, replaced by a wall of glass. That's when I saw him. At the end of one corridor, about 20 feet away, was a figure, tall, thin, wearing what looked like a dirty carnival worker's uniform. He wasn't moving, just standing perfectly still, his face hidden in the shadows. "Megan," I whispered.
"I see him," I shouted, trying to sound braver than I felt. "Hey, we're trying to get out of here."
The man didn't respond. Slowly, so slowly, he raised his hand and pressed it against the mirror in front of him. Only, it didn't look like he was behind a mirror. It looked like he was inside it. Megan started pulling me down another hall. We rushed blindly through the maze, our hands leaving smears on the glass as we tried to feel our way. Every reflection now showed that same tall man somewhere in the background, closer each time, sometimes behind us, sometimes right over my shoulder, sometimes standing next to Megan when no one was there. Finally, we stumbled out of the maze and into the open night air. The sudden sound of carnival music and chatter hit us like a wave. I was drenched in sweat, gasping for air. Megan looked pale. "What's the matter, folks? See a ghost in there?" We didn't answer. We just walked away quickly, too shaken to stay any longer. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the image of my reflection smiling at me. I closed my eyes and still saw it, standing behind the glass, waiting. I closed my eyes and still saw it, standing behind the glass, waiting. And here's the part that made me stop doubting what I saw. And here's the part that made me stop doubting what I saw. The next day, Megan texted me a picture she'd taken inside the funhouse. In the photo, we were both standing in front of a distorted mirror, laughing. But in the reflection behind us there was a third figure, tall, thin, face hidden, standing directly behind me. Story 2. The Clown in the Funhouse. I grew up in a small town where nothing exciting ever happened, so when the traveling carnival came through every summer, it was the highlight of the year. The rides weren't amazing, the games were rigged, and the food was overpriced, but it was something. The flashing lights, the sound of Calliope music, and the buzz of people crowding the midway always made the place feel alive. I was 19 the summer this happened, and it was the last time I ever set foot at a carnival. It was a Friday night, the air hot and sticky, and a couple of my friends and I decided to head over. The fairground was set up in an open field behind the old high school, where the grass was worn thin from years of use. From a distance, you could already see the giant Ferris wheel spinning slowly, its lights blinking against the darkening sky. The air smelled of fried dough, popcorn, and cotton candy, mixed with the faint oily stench of machinery. We paid our admission and were swallowed into the crowd. The midway was packed. Teenagers in groups laughing too loud, parents trailing after sticky-faced kids, couples holding hands and sharing funnel cakes. Carnies barked at anyone who passed their booths, daring us to win oversized stuffed animals by tossing rings on bottles or shooting water into clown mouths. I didn't care much about the games, but the atmosphere always pulled me in. That night, though, something felt different. It was hard to put into words at first. Maybe it was just the heavy air, or the way some of the ride operators stared too long at the crowd. I brushed it off and went along with my friends. We went on a few rides, spun ourselves sick on the tilt-a-whirl, and then split up for food. While my friends headed for corn dogs, I wandered off, weaving through the crowds until I reached the darker end of the fairgrounds. That's where the freak show attractions were. They weren't real, of course, just cheap sideshow gimmicks. There was a tent with a painted banner that claimed to have a two-headed snake, another with a living mermaid, and one that caught my attention right away: the House of Mirrors. It was a big structure, half tent, half trailer, painted with swirls of neon colors that were faded and peeling. A large clown face was painted over the entrance, its mouth open wide like you were walking straight into its throat. Above it, in flickering lights, the words "Carnival of Reflections" glowed unevenly. But after a while, I started noticing small things that didn't add up. In one reflection, my face looked slightly different, like my eyes were a fraction too wide. In another, my reflection's mouth curved upward into a smile I wasn't making. I laughed nervously, assuming it was just the warped glass. But the deeper I went, the stronger the feeling grew that I wasn't alone in there. The sound of my footsteps echoed strangely, like someone was walking just out of sight. I stopped, held my breath, and listened. Somewhere in the maze, I swore I heard breathing. I told myself it was another guest inside, but when I called out, "Hello? Anyone else in here?" the only reply was silence. I turned a corner and froze. one of the mirrors showed a figure standing behind me. A man, tall and thin, with a white painted face and a wide grin. My heart jumped, and I spun around, but there was no one there. The hallway was empty. I looked back at the mirror, and the figure was gone. My pulse was racing now. I told myself it was just a trick, maybe one of the carnival workers trying to spook guests. Still, I wanted out. I moved quickly, trying to retrace my steps, but the maze only seemed to go deeper. The music outside was gone completely now, replaced by a low hum that I couldn't place. Every reflection seemed a little off, like the mirrors were showing pieces of another world. I turned another corner and nearly screamed. There was someone standing in the hall ahead of me. At first I thought it was another visitor, but as I squinted, I realized he was dressed like an old-fashioned clown baggy striped suit, frilly collar, and a painted white face with exaggerated black eyes and a red grin. He didn't move. Just stood there, staring at me. Hey, I said nervously. Do you work here? No response. I took a step back, and instantly the figure tilted its head slightly, like it was studying me. I felt my throat tighten. Every instinct told me to run, so I turned and bolted, weaving through the maze as fast as I could, my hands outstretched to keep from smashing into mirrors. Behind me, I swore I heard the sound of footsteps following, slow and deliberate. Finally, after what felt like forever, I stumbled into the exit. I burst through the curtains and into the humid night air, gasping. The sounds of the carnival rushed back all at once, the games, the music, the laughter. People were everywhere, oblivious. I spun around to look at the entrance, but the clown wasn't there. I forced myself to calm down and laughed nervously. Jesus, get a grip, I muttered. Maybe it was just some actor planted in the maze to scare people. That had to be it. I found my friends again and didn't mention what happened. We spent another hour at the carnival, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. The lights seemed too bright, the laughter too forced, the whole place like a mask hiding something rotten underneath. As we were leaving, I glanced back one last time at the fairgrounds. The Ferris wheel loomed against the dark sky, the games still buzzing with energy, the house of mirrors sitting silently at the far end. That's when I saw him again, the clown. Standing outside the mirror maze, half hidden in the shadows, staring right at me. I blinked, and he was gone. That was years ago, but I've never forgotten it. The carnival still comes to town every summer, but I haven't gone back. Story 3, I Can't. I don't know if what I saw was a worker in a costume, some lunatic, or something else entirely. But I know one thing. There was something in that maze that wasn't supposed to be there, and I think it followed me out. I've never been a fan of carnivals, but one summer, a group of friends convinced me to go with them to this traveling carnival that had set up just outside our town. It was one of those temporary setups in a huge empty field, filled with neon rides, greasy food stalls, and a crowd of families, teenagers, and shady-looking carnies. The air was thick with fried dough, smoke, and something that just felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the whole place gave me a bad vibe from the moment we walked in. We were supposed to stick together, but as usually happens in big crowds, we got split up. My friends were more interested in hitting the rides while I drifted toward the sideshow attractions. They had all kinds of strange setups, fun houses, haunted mazes, and game booths with half-broken prizes hanging limp on hooks. Something about the sideshow tents felt old, like they had been dragged around for decades, stained and worn down, holding secrets inside. I ended up going into one of the smaller tents by myself. A sign outside called it the House of Curiosities. The letters were peeling, and the paint had faded so badly it was hard to read. But I was curious, so I paid the ticket and stepped inside. The tent smelled like dust and mildew, and inside were rows of glass cases with weird objects, jars with cloudy liquid holding things that looked like deformed animals, shrunken heads, and bones that may or may not have been real. I walked slowly through the dim tent, listening to the muffled laughter of the crowd outside. Then I noticed something strange. Toward the back, in a glass case by itself, was what looked like a wax figure of a man. His eyes were glassy, his mouth slightly open, and his skin was pale and sunken. The little sign on the case read, "The Real Freak." I laughed a little at first, thinking it was just a gimmick. But the longer I stared, the more uncomfortable I felt. The skin didn't look fake. It looked dry, cracked. The fingernails had dirt underneath them. It wasn't a wax figure at all. It looked like a real body. I backed away, my stomach tightening. Just then, the old woman who had sold me the ticket came out from behind the curtain at the back of the tent. She was stooped over, with a face full of wrinkles and eyes that didn't seem to blink. She smiled at me with yellow teeth and said, "Authentic, isn't it?" I stammered something about it looking real, and she nodded slowly. "He was one of us once. He wanted to stay here forever. Now he does." That was all she said. I hurried out of the tent, shaken and trying to convince myself it was just a scare tactic to spook customers. My friends laughed when I told them, saying it was probably just a mannequin made to look real. I tried to laugh along with them, but it didn't sit right with me. Later that night, the crowd started thinning as the families with little kids left. The carnival always took on a darker tone at night. The rides looked more dangerous, the carnies more sinister, and the shadows stretched longer between the tents. My friends wanted to hit the haunted maze before we left, so we all bought tickets and went in together. The maze was built out of plywood walls covered with painted sheets set up like a winding hallway. At first, it was pretty typical. Jump scares, flashing lights, people in masks jumping out from hidden doors. But as we went deeper inside, the air grew colder. The strobe lights and sound effects faded, and the path became harder to follow. We realized after a while that there weren't as many actors anymore. The halls twisted and doubled back in ways that didn't make sense. We were all laughing nervously, trying to figure out if we'd gone in circles. At one point, I turned a corner and saw someone standing completely still in the middle of the hallway. He was tall, wearing old-fashioned carnival clothes, striped pants, a faded vest, and a bowler hat. His face was pale and cracked, like dried leather. I thought it was just another actor, but he didn't move. His eyes looked directly at me. They weren't playful or trying to spook me. They were flat, dead. I called out to my friends, but when I turned back, the man was gone. I laughed it off, but the laughter sounded hollow even to me. We pushed on, but the deeper we went, the more wrong it felt. At some point, the music and sound effects completely stopped, and the only noise was our footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. We finally saw what looked like the exit sign, glowing red in the distance. Relieved, we headed toward it quickly, but the closer we got, the dimmer the light became, until it blinked out entirely. Suddenly, we were in pitch blackness. We froze. Then, faintly, we heard something shuffling behind us. One of my friends pulled out his phone for light, but the battery had died. Another tried theirs, but it was the same. Dead. It was like something was draining everything in that place. The shuffling grew louder, closer, until it sounded like someone breathing right behind us. We ran. The hallway twisted and turned endlessly, but no matter which way we went, we couldn't find the exit. At one point, I glanced over my shoulder and saw him again, the man in the bowler hat, following us at a slow, steady pace. His arms hung stiffly at his sides, his cracked mouth curled into a faint smile. We kept running until finally, out of nowhere, we stumbled out into the night air. We were outside the carnival, standing behind the rides near a row of trucks. None of us remembered how we'd gotten there. The maze entrance wasn't anywhere nearby. When we turned around to look, there was nothing behind us but an empty stretch of dirt field. We walked back into the carnival in silence. None of us wanted to talk about what had just happened. My friends left quickly after that, brushing it off as bad design or a weird scare tactic, but I knew better. That place was wrong. It wasn't just fake scares and actors, it was something much darker. For weeks after, I had nightmares about the man in the bowler hat. Sometimes I'd wake up and swear I saw him standing at the corner of my room, watching me. Eventually the dreams faded, but the feeling never really went away. And now, every time a traveling carnival sets up nearby, I avoid it completely. Because I know that some things you see at those places aren't just attractions. Story 4. They're real. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who got spooked by carnivals. I always associated them with fried food, cheap rides, and cheesy haunted houses that tried too hard to be scary. But I learned the hard way that some carnivals don't close when they should. Some of them linger like an infection that nobody can get rid of. That's what I found out one summer night in my hometown, when I stayed too long at a carnival that wasn't supposed to be there anymore. It started in July, during a heat wave. A traveling carnival set up in the abandoned lot at the edge of town, the kind of place teenagers usually go to smoke or drink. They had the usual things: Ferris wheel, bumper cars, rigged games, and greasy food stands. Everyone went at least once. It was supposed to run for 2 weeks, but by the 3rd week, people noticed it hadn't packed up. No advertisements, no dates, no final night announcements. It just stayed. I went on a Friday night with 2 friends, Jordan and Melissa. The crowd was thinner than it had been before, but the carnival looked exactly the same. The Ferris wheel still spun slowly against the dark sky, lit up with bulbs that never seemed to burn out. The funhouse mirrors still distorted people's faces in unsettling ways. The games still shouted for customers, their operators never changing, never looking tired. That's what struck me. Normally, carnies are rough-looking, sunburned, and exhausted. But here, they all looked eerily clean, almost like mannequins, same clothes every night, same smiles, same voices calling out. Want to try your luck? Win a prize. One man yelled, his teeth too white, his voice too smooth. Jordan leaned into me and whispered, "They look fake, man, like robots." We laughed it off and went on some rides. The tilt-a-whirl spun faster than it should have, so much that Melissa screamed until she got sick. We got off, dizzy, and noticed something else odd. The crowd was smaller, but nobody seemed to leave. People walked in through the gates, but I never saw anyone walk out. By midnight, Jordan wanted to go. Melissa was still pale from being sick, so we started heading toward the exit, but when we got there the gate was gone, not closed, not locked, gone. Just a chain-link fence with no opening. "Wait," I said, "we came in right here. The ticket booth was right here." But it wasn't. The booth was gone too. Just more fence, stretching endlessly in both directions. Melissa started panicking. Jordan shook the fence, yelling for someone to help, but nobody paid attention. The carnival kept moving, the music kept playing, the Ferris wheel kept spinning. The other visitors walked around like everything was fine. We tried asking an employee. I walked up to the man at the ring toss booth. His smile never changed when I said, "How do we get out of here?" "You'll win a prize if you try your luck." He said, word for word, like he hadn't even heard me. I shouted it louder. "How do we leave?"
His smile twitched just slightly. Then, still staring at me, he said, "Win a prize." His voice dragged out the words like a record slowing down. I backed away. Jordan grabbed Melissa's hand and pulled us further into the carnival, hoping to find another exit. We circled the place for almost an hour. No matter which direction we went, it was just rides, booths, and lights.
The Ferris wheel always seemed close by, no matter how far we walked. Finally, Jordan said, "Let's just cut through the fence. There's no way this is real." We found a section of fence behind the funhouse. He kicked it, but the metal didn't bend or rattle. It was solid, like a wall. I pressed my hands against it and realized it wasn't even metal. It was cold stone, painted to look like chain link. My stomach dropped. That's when the lights flickered. Just for a second, but long enough for me to notice the crowd. All of them were frozen in place. Every single person in the carnival just stopped moving mid-step, mid-bite, mid-laugh. When the lights came back, they continued as if nothing happened. Melissa screamed, and Jordan swore under his breath. We ran toward the Ferris wheel, thinking maybe being higher up would show us a way out. We climbed into one of the cars, and it started moving immediately, even though nobody was operating it. The higher we got, the more wrong everything looked. The carnival didn't end. It stretched out endlessly, rides and booths repeating over and over in every direction. Ferris wheels on the horizon, food stands lined up like grids, fun houses stacked against each other. There was no town, no roads, no horizon, just carnival. Melissa cried, "It's not real. It can't be real." When we reached the top, the wheel stopped. Our car hung there, swaying. Below us, the frozen moment happened again. The crowd stopped, the lights flickered, and every carny turned their head upward, staring directly at us. Their faces didn't change, but I swear their eyes weren't human anymore. Jordan yelled, "Go, jump." We jumped from the car into the roof of the funhouse. The fall knocked the wind out of me, but adrenaline kept me moving. We scrambled down the side and into the maze of mirrors. Inside, it was worse. The mirrors didn't just distort us, they showed things that weren't there. Behind me, I saw myself hanging from a noose. Behind me, I saw myself hanging from a noose. In another mirror, Jordan's face was ripped open. In another, Melissa was gone, replaced with something pale and grinning. She bolted ahead, screaming, and we lost her in the reflections. Jordan and I tried to chase her, but the maze twisted in ways that didn't make sense. Every turn led us deeper. The air smelled like rot, like old meat. Finally, we burst out into the open, but Melissa wasn't there. The crowd still walked in circles. The ride still spun, but the laughter and music had stopped. The only sound was the creak of the Ferris wheel turning. We never found her. Jordan and I ran for what felt like hours, screaming her name, begging for help, clawing at the fake fences. At some point, Jordan disappeared too. One second he was beside me, the next, gone. Now it's just me. I don't know how long I've been here. The carnival never ends. The employees never change. The crowd never leaves. I keep looking for the exit, but it isn't there anymore. The only thing that changes are the mirrors in the funhouse. Every time I look, they show me closer and closer to dying. Sometimes I think I already did, but the rides keep spinning. The Ferris wheel never stops, and the carnival never closes.